something that gives you a chance to maximize and reach your potential, something that gives you a chance to maximize and grab hold of all the things that God wants to do in your life. I'm talking about recognizing the importance of trade-offs. To become more successful and reach your potential, you're going to have to make some trade-offs. So many people are troubled by the unknown, like they have a fear of the unknown. Even if they're unhappy in their current circumstances, they're still scared of the unknown. I'd rather go to the unknown than sit in mediocre circumstances. What if everything is on the other side of my fear? Everything that I want. What if it's all there? Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm Larry Davis, and this is the Growth State of Mind. And today I want to talk about trade-offs. I want to talk about how you have to give up to grow up. You know, in the Bible, Jesus often challenges challenges his followers, or those who want to follow him, to let go of things that hold them back. He urges them to take up their cross and follow him. And in order to take up your cross and follow him, that means you got to make a trade-off. That means you have to give up one thing for another thing. And that's the same thing goes for us. If we want to walk into something different, we have to be willing to give up something that we had in the past, something old, right? And so, we have to be willing to give up some of these things in order to grow. And it's not always easy, but as we explore this together, I believe that you will find the encouragement and the strength and the inspiration that is needed to make the necessary trade-offs in your life so that you can have a more fulfilling life, a more purposeful life, because God has a purpose for you. But your purpose, the purpose that God has for you, the will that God has for you, sometimes, most of the time, is going to require you to give up some things that you used to do in order to walk into some things that he wants you to do in the future. If you haven't already, just hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified when the updated episodes get released. And so, like I said, today I want to talk about making trade-offs, how you have to give up in order to grow up. But before we do that, I want to tell you about a 7-day devotional that I created just for you. And it's called Mind Over Matter, winning the battle in your mind. And so, because listen, we all face battles, but a lot of times these battles that we face are in our mind. Sometimes it's not what's going on the outside as much as it's what's going on in the inside, in between our ears. Sometimes that is the biggest battle that we're facing. Sometimes the biggest battle is not other people, is not other situations. Sometimes it's ourselves. Sometimes it's our minds, what we think in our minds, the negativity and the toxic thoughts that we have in our minds. Sometimes that's the biggest battle that we're facing, just fighting the battle in our minds. And so I created this 7-day devotional to help you learn how to win these battles in your mind. And you win them by using the strategy of God's word. And so you will want to get that devotional. It's a 7-day devotional. If you sign up for it, it'll come to your inbox every day for 7 straight days. And so if you want to get that, you can just go to my Instagram, and my Instagram is I am LA Davis. You just go there, send me a DM the word devotional, and I'll send that straight to you. Again, go to my Instagram, I am LA Davis, and just DM me the word devotional, and then I will send that directly to you. Now, let's get to what I want to talk about today. You see, we're talking about trade-offs, making the necessary trade-offs in your life. See, people, they will cling to an unsatisfactory way of life rather than changing to get something better. Sometimes people are willing to stay in what's familiar, even though they may not be happy, even though they may not be fulfilled, they may not be satisfied. They're willing to stay in that thing because they don't want to take the chance to go get something better. Because you taking a chance. You taking a chance because you already know what's familiar over here. A lot of people say, I'd rather fight the devil that I know than the devil that I don't know, right? And so, but that's a bad thing, because that means that you're not willing to step out on faith, right? That means you're not willing to step out on faith to get something better, and you're willing to stay in something that is worse because you fear stepping out into the unknown. That's basically what that is. The fear of stepping out into the unknown. And so a lot of people are not willing to do what it takes to get to the next level. And sometimes going to the next level requires you to get out of your comfort zone. It requires you to let go of some things that you used to do, to let go of some situations that you used to be in, and to let go of some people that you used to be around. Because listen, if you're going to go to the next level takes vision. The next level takes vision. The next level takes hard work. And the next level takes some sacrifice. And that sacrifice is giving up some of those old things that you used to. And so in order to go to the next level, man, you gotta start making some trade-offs. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Because here's the thing. You got to be willing to do what most people won't do. You got to be willing to do what most people won't do. And most people are not willing to give up something to get something, right? You got to let some stuff go. And there's no way that you can, because there's no way that you can take your old self with you to your new destiny. And not giving up on some things is one of the main things that hold people back. They're just not willing to give up some of their old things, some of their old ways, some of their old habits, right? And so, for instance, you might have a nice little job. You might have a decent salary. You might have a nice little home in a nice little neighborhood. And all those things are good. All of those things are good. But let me ask you a question. Are you willing to give up those things for a chance at doing something better? Are you willing to give up those things to get something that's better, something that is more aligned with your destiny? You got to ask yourself that question. Something that gives you a chance to maximize and reach your potential. Something that gives you a chance to maximize and grab hold of all the things that God wants to do in your life. I'm talking about recognizing the importance of trade-offs, because to become more successful and reach your potential, you're going to have to make some trade-offs. So many people are troubled by the unknown. Like, they have a fear of the unknown. But even if they're unhappy in their current circumstances, they're still scared of the unknown. I'd rather go to the unknown than sit in mediocre circumstances. Because, hey, what if everything is on the other side of my fear? Everything that I want. What if it's all there? You can't be afraid of it. This reminds me of the Israelites. You know, the Israelites in the Bible, during, when they was leaving Egypt, or even after they left Egypt. After they left Egypt, they wanted to go back because they faced some challenges in the wilderness, and some of those challenges made them long to go back to slavery. You see what I'm saying? And so that's a mindset that people have. They're willing to go back to slavery because there's a little challenge out here in the wilderness that they got to get through. And once they get through that challenge, they'll get to the promised land. But they couldn't see that. They were so short-sighted that all they can see is the challenges that they're facing now. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes our trade-offs that we have to make, sometimes it presents new challenges. And because people don't want to face any challenges, they rather go back to slavery. They rather go back to an old situation that was not the best for them. And so, and you see it right there with the children of Israel. And then Moses was their leader. Moses was trying to lead them out, and they started complaining to him, talking about what they had to eat, in Egypt, talking about we was sitting around with these pots of meat and we had all the food that we wanted, but they really didn't. They really didn't. They really didn't have everything that they wanted. And they started to reminisce on something that wasn't even that good. And that's the problem. People want to cling to what's familiar, even if it means enduring an unsatisfactory life. Just like the prospect of change, it feels overwhelming. And that's something that we all face. There's something that we all face, whether it's staying in a job we don't like, or holding on to an unhealthy relationship, or just the fear of getting something worse. Sometimes we fear, okay, it's bad now, but what if I get something worse? And you got to be willing to take that chance, because if you already in a bad situation, but you afraid that it could get worse, like, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Worse is just worse. You know what I'm saying? And so that, to me, that don't make sense. That don't make sense at all. And so you got to remember that God calls us out of our comfort zones because he wants to lead us to something better. He wants to lead us to something better. And you got to trust that God wants to lead you to something better. You got to trust that. You got to trust that he has a plan for you. He has a purpose for you, and he has a destiny for you. Because he says, for I know the plans that I have towards you. Plans of good and not of evil. Plans to give you a future and a hope. So you got to trust that. You got to believe that. And you got to be encouraged and trust in his plan for your life. Even when you're faced with uncertainty, you got to trust his plan for your life and trust that his intentions are for your good and for your well-being. And so you have to embrace change with courage and faith, believing that God has a purpose beyond your current circumstances. You got to believe that, because stepping into something better requires you to step into the unknown. It really does. It requires you to step into the unknown. But if you trust God in these moments, you will discover the abundance that God has in store for you. I'm talking about giving up to grow up. You got to give up to grow up. You see, a lot of people, we're talking about trade-offs. You see, a lot of people, when they're faced with a decision to make a trade-off, to go to another level, because like I said, you got to make trade-offs in order to go to the next level. They have a tendency to ask themselves questions. They have a tendency to ask the wrong questions. Questions like, how hard would this be? Right? How hard would this be? How much work do I got to do? How long is it going to take? All of those questions. Those are the questions that people ask when they're faced with making a trade-off that's going to help them. They start asking these silly questions like, how hard is it going to be? Why? It's already hard where you at right now. So why are you asking these silly questions about how hard is it going to be? And so all of these questions are the wrong questions. The questions you need to be asking is, what if this does work? What if it works out? What if more people like me because I'm doing something to help people? What about those questions? Start asking the question like, okay, how can this be a blessing to other people? How can I be a blessing to other people after I walk into this new thing that God is trying to do in my life? These are the questions that you should be asking. These are the questions of abundance. You see, those other questions were questions of lack. Those other questions were questions of a poor mindset, right? These are the questions of abundance. Like, what if it does work out? What if I do help a lot of people? What if I do gain more friends? What if I do gain more influence? Those are the questions that you have to ask, because this idea of giving up something to get something it's like a spiritual paradox, right? It's like a spiritual paradox. Sometimes it seems like it doesn't make sense that you have to give up something to go up, but it's true. It is true. Just think about what Jesus said when he said, who wants to save his life has to lose his life. And whoever loses his life will find his life. That seems like it don't make sense. But this challenges us to let go of certain things in order to get something else. This challenges us to experience a deeper, more meaningful life. You see, in the context of personal development, sometimes we need to let go of old habits. We need to let go of limiting beliefs or even some relationships that hinder our progress. It's like when you prune a plant. Sometimes you have to, like a rose bush, you have to prune it in order for it to grow. And that's exactly what Jesus was talking about in John. He says that he cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, because you gotta, in order to bear fruit, you gotta be pruned. When you think about a bush, right? In order for it to be more fruitful. And that's why he says that he cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes it. He prunes it so it can be even more fruitful. And that's the same thing with us. When we let go of a lot of things in our lives that no longer serve us or no longer align with God's purpose for our lives, we can create a space for new opportunities, new experiences, and a personal transformation. See, it's about surrendering our will to God's will and trusting that he has a plan that's far better than anything that we can ever think of for ourselves. It's far better than whatever we can think of. It's just like when Jesus approached Peter and the other disciples, when he approached them and he said, "Follow me, come follow me." And they were fishermen. They had a fishing business, and they were doing well as fishermen. But Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." right? And if you read that verse, it's in the next verse, it says that they immediately left their nets and followed him. Immediately. Now, these dudes had a whole, that was their way of living. They had a fishing business. They did that and they had a whole business to where they had employees and all that. They had a fleet of boats and all those things. And Jesus said, drop that and come follow me. And they did it immediately, without question. They did it because they understood the trade-off that they were making. They understood that in order to get something greater, I got to let go of this. I got to let go of this thing that I did in the older season to step into a new season for where God is taking me. They realized that. How many of us miss those opportunities to where God is speaking to us? God is trying to say, follow me. I have a new path for you. How many of us miss that opportunity? How many of us miss that calling to drop what we're doing and follow him? How many of us miss it? You see, they knew that they had to leave some things behind if they had to follow him. They knew that they had to make that trade-off. Peter had to give up what was familiar as a fisherman in order to grow to be who he came to be as one of the apostles in the early church. And so you would think that he's losing out on his business, but he gained something far more greater than that. And so giving up to grow up is it's not about losing out. It's about gaining a richer, more fulfilling, purposeful life that aligns with God's plan and letting go of anything that doesn't align with that. Letting go of anything that hinders what God wants to do with you. Letting go of anything that hinders the spiritual and the growth that he wants to do in your life. It's an invitation to trust the process of growth and transformation that God has for each and every one of us. And if you think about it, in your life, all throughout your life, you've come to decisions to where you had to make a trade-off. All throughout your life. That's just a part of life, making trade-offs. Whether you realize it or not, you have made some trade-offs. Sometimes when you don't do anything, that's making a trade-off. Sometimes no decision is a decision. And you've made a trade-off whether you believe it or not. And so that's just a part of life. Those are the choices that we make. We don't make one choice in order to make another choice. And so these trade-offs, like I said, they can be physical, they can be emotional, financial. It can be all of that. And so we make trade-offs all the time. Sometimes we just don't realize it. We make trade-offs between people. We make trade-offs when choosing relationships. We make trade-offs when we're trying to explore different opportunities. Whatever it is, we make these trade-offs. And so it's important to know that mostly everything involves a trade-off. Mostly everything involves a trade-off. And sometimes, I ain't gonna lie to you, sometimes some trade-offs are painful. They're painful in the short term. But the thing about it is, it may have a long-term benefit. I would rather make a sacrifice to experience pain in the short term to experience abundance or fulfillment in the long term. I would rather do that. But most people are not willing to do that. And so we must learn to see these trade-offs as opportunities for growth. Because one of the biggest differences between a successful person and an unsuccessful person is the choices that they make. That's the main difference, is the choices that they make. People that are not successful are not willing to make certain choices. They're not willing to give up certain things in order to gain something else, something greater. And so here's the thing. We don't always get what we want, but we always get what we choose. We don't always get what we want, but we will definitely always get what we choose. And that's the power of choice. That is the power of choice. You think about Adam and Eve in the garden. They had everything they needed. Everything they needed in the garden. God said that you can freely eat of every tree in this garden except this one. That's what he told them. And they had everything that they needed. But they made a choice. And that choice changed everything. It changed everything for them. And In my life, there have been times where I made a choice, and I had to bear the fruit of that choice, because there's times where I made a choice. There's times where I didn't get what I wanted initially, but looking back in those moments, even in the moments where I didn't get what I wanted, sometimes I got what I wanted later on, and it was something better. It was something better. And so you have to learn to align your choices with the values and trusting God that he's going to work all things out for your good. Because life is 10% of what happens to you and only 90% of how you react to it. It's that should remind you that our circumstances may be on our control, but our response is always up to us. It's always up to us. And so when you think about these trade-offs, when you faced with a decision, the decision of making a trade-off, you gotta ask yourself some questions, and you gotta ask yourself the right questions. The right questions. The right questions will allow you to look at the facts rather than just speculate on your opinion or something. When you ask yourself the right question, you can look at the facts, and these facts will let you know exactly what you're giving up. Sometimes we don't look at the facts and we think that we're giving up something that we're not really giving up. Sometimes we're making it worse. We're making the trade-off seem worse because of what we think. And sometimes you got to get the facts. You got to get the real facts. That way you know exactly what trade-off you're making. And it may not be as bad as you seem once you get the real actual facts. And so the trade-offs, they will force you to make difficult personal changes in your life, changes that you need to make in your life. When you recognize how trade-offs work, you'll make those choices. Because here, when you want something that you never had, you got to be willing to do something that you've never done before to get it. And if you don't, you're going to keep getting the same results. If you want something different, you got to do something different. You got to make a different choice. You got to start making a different trade-off. Because if you don't, you're going to keep going through the same old, and nothing is ever going to change in your life. And I know I get it. Change is not easy, but it can be done. You got to make some changes. And all you have to do is decide. You can just decide that I'm going to do something different. You can just decide that I'm going to make the necessary trade-off. You can just decide that even in the face of this trade-off, even if it seems challenging, I'm going to make this trade-off because I know it's going to serve me better in the end. You just got to decide. Because the difference between where you are right now and where you want to be is based on the trade-offs that you're willing to make. I've seen this in my own life. To where I had to be willing to embrace the unknown. I had to be willing to be uncomfortable for a season to get something greater later on. And I've seen this in other people. I've seen other people make this transformation in their lives. People stepping out on faith to make changes in their life, whether it's breaking free from a unhealthy relationship or overcoming addictions or pursuing a new path that aligned with their purpose. It was challenging, but I've seen people get through it. And I know you can do the same thing. And I'm not even always talking about big changes. Like sometimes there's small changes that you can make. Sometimes there's small trade-offs that you can make that will lead to big outcomes. But here's the thing that gets a lot of people. When you think about a trade-off, the loss of a trade-off is usually felt long before the gain. Like you'll feel the loss before you feel the gain. Like if you make a trade-off, you're going to feel the pain from that trade-off before you can get the positive result. And that's what scares a lot of people away. But you got to go into that understanding that it's just like reaping. It's just like planting or reaping and sowing. If you sow, you're not going to reap the next same day. You're not going to reap anything that same day. And when you make that sacrifice, that day is hard. It's just like when you're working out. If you start to work out, when you work out, you're not going to get muscles the same day. You're not going to lose weight the same day. So you're going to experience the pain of working out, but the positive result of getting down to a weight that you want to be at or gaining muscle, that positive result, that comes way later. And a lot of people are not willing to wait that long. They're not willing to wait that long to receive their blessing because they're so focused on the current challenge that they're facing now. They're so focused on the pain that they feel right now. But you got to be willing to pay the price, because the price of anything is the amount of life that you're willing to exchange for it. It's about recognizing the value of your time, your energy, and your resources. So I say all that to say this. It's time to be intentional about the price that we're willing to pay for the things that we pursue. It's time to be intentional about the trade-offs that we need to make. It's time to be intentional about making investments that align with your values and your purpose. And that's when you recognize that the true richness of life is found in the meaningful exchanges that we are willing to make. And those are the things that matter the most. And so what are some trade-offs that you are willing to make? Think about it. Like, are you willing to give up what you think is financial security for potential, for greater potential? Are you willing to give up that? Because a lot of people place a lot of security in their job, but there's no security in your job. The security is in you and what you can do, in your purpose and your potential. The security is not in the job. The security is in you. And the only job security that anybody have is your commitment to being better every day. So are you willing to give up financial security for a greater fulfillment, greater potential? Those are some questions that you got to ask. What are some trade-offs that you think are worth making? Are you willing to give up immediate gratification for personal growth? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to give up what satisfies you here and today for something that's going to sustain you and satisfy you for years and years to come? Or are you going to continue to be short-sighted and think about what makes you happy right now in this moment? Because what makes you happy right now in this moment could be just ruining your life or keeping you stuck and not growing to your fullest potential. Are you willing to give up the fast life for a good life? That's a good one there. You think about that. And I'll say this. Are you willing to give up security for significance? What you think that you're secure in. And I'm not talking about money necessarily. I'm talking about just some people are secure in their ways. Some people they feel like they're secure in what they know. Are you willing to give up security for significance? Because that's really what it's all about. That's really what I want my life to be about. I want my life to be about significance. I don't want my life to be about that I'm worried about being safe and secure right now. I want to live a life of significance. And sometimes you got to give up what you think is secure in order to get what's significant. You see, most people, they're capable of making a living, and that's the same thing. But the significant thing is making a difference. Because if you think about, and I'll leave you with this, the great men and women of history, they were not great because of what they earned. They were not great because of the amount of money they had. The great men and women of history, they were great because of what they accomplished. And so that's something that you got to realize. The great men and women that we know, the Martin Luther Kings, people like that, they were not great. When you think about Martin Luther King, you don't think about how much money he made. You think about what he did, what he accomplished on this earth. And so that's a trade-off that you got to be willing to make. And so I'll ask you, what trade-off are you willing to make right now? I'll leave you with that. What trade-off are you willing to make right now? Because are you going to make the trade? Are you going to continue to just settle for the life that you live now? Or are you going to make the trade-off to something greater?